Hello, friends. It's Chop. There's very few companies that were willing to take a chance, on a veteran like Brace. But Lockheed Martin, they were the one that stepped up.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I mean, I've been just kind of like a design modern guy my whole life, and I'm thrilled to be recognized.
Yeah, and you were the Lockheed Martin Employee of the Month, and you were also the inspiration behind everyone's favorite webcomic, Mom Life.
Hmm.
You're eating those peaches every fucking day. You're eating them in front of the kids as they're crying.
Well, I started drawing those things just to like imagine not only what would it be like to be married and have a kid, but what it would be like to be a woman in that position. And I mean, I'm just thrilled that a lot of people have recognized that.
You're being recognized more and more for all the good work you're doing, Brace. But we didn't want to have you on today to talk about your work for webcomics or defense contractors. We wanted to have you on today to talk about just like sort of a development in the left political sphere. I mean, a lot of times people talk to us, they're like, "Oh, where's the left going? What do we do? What organizations out there we're supporting?" And today I'd like to talk about, one salutary organization that I think has done a lot of good work, or at least they're trying. And I'm referring to the recent developments in the long percolating saga of the Black Hammer organization and their leader, the man known only as Commander Ghazi.
This has been these past 2 weeks have been some of the most thrilling as a longtime Hammerhead.
Yeah, you were
Watching the
watching the like live streams and stuff where they were doing their struggle sessions, right? Like,
Dude, I've not only watched basically all of their live streams. I'm a long time watching Ghazi's just YouTube videos. I've also watched the Reparations Corps Twitch streams where they played Warzone and talked about. I know it's their all white members who have just numbers instead of names, who talk about the need for reparations and things like that. I was at one point the only viewer of that channel. Um, and it's just, I'm so glad to kind of see this work come full circle.
I like the idea that playing Warzone is a punishment for slavery and being a settler.
Yes.
But Brace, let's go through what are the most recent revelations in the Black Hammer saga, and then let's get into what is the Black Hammer organization, what is their ideology, and then what can we do to help?
So Black Hammer, if you spent any time looking at insane people on the internet, which is easy to do, in fact, it's almost unavoidable. Black Hammer has kind of like made the rounds a few times, notably for starting Hammer City in the mountains of Colorado. They were famously pilloried for calling Anne Frank a Becky, and
And the colonizer, I believe,
and a colonizer, yeah, and then sort of trying to justify it by being like, well, her dad was in the army in the First World War as a conscript, and then most recently after Hammer City, didn't exactly work out. They moved to Atlanta and then started going even more insane, started a war against former members, moved kind of from house to house where everyone lived together. And then very recently, I guess like about 7 or 8 days ago, were raided by the police after someone in the house called the police and in hushed, whispered tones said, like, being held against my will. The police come. A member appears to have killed themselves, and then Ghazi is arrested. Although Ghazi is saying that the member was killed by the FBI, it seems unlikely that happened. Although who knows? And Ghazi was arrested on a litany of charges, including forced sodomy and which I guess is just it's a way to charge someone in Georgia, kidnapping, I think false imprisonment, a raft of charges, and then a few days later they weren't named, but it was very clear that they were part of an FBI indictment against a Russian national named Alexander Ionov, who was charged with being, I guess, an unregistered agent of the Russian government and funding Black Hammer and a couple of other groups, one of whom is about as insane as Black Hammer, and the other whom is, sort of an older group, also pretty nuts, named African People's Socialist Party.
We were talking before the episode about how with Ivanov, we actually knew about this because Ghazi
Yeah.
openly posted on Facebook about this, like about 2 years ago. I love my Russian daddy who's
Yes.
giving me money, and so we knew that was going on. I mean, yeah, like we said, I don't think the DOJ would lie about it, but it's just like, you kind of wonder what the Russians were hoping to accomplish here, if anything.
Yeah.
They were hoping to start a city in Colorado, Felix, that would be a
Uh,
beachhead for their invasion of the rest of the country.
yeah, they were hoping to start an all-white Warzone stream.
Yes. Well, so
Mission accomplished.
that's kind of the craziest thing, right? Is because like, Ionov is he is, I mean, he's still active on Facebook. In fact, he's very active on Facebook. I encourage people to look him up. He is, I gotta say, he's a baller and a pimp. He fucking looks cool, big cigars, 7 feet tall, constantly
No.
traveling the world, an entrepreneur, sick watches, many pictures in a Rolls Royce that he clearly does not own, which is actually more baller than owning one. Um,
Absolutely.
because it's a waste of money. But he's sort of he's the head of this thing called the anti-globalization movement of Russia, which basically seems to be a weird like political movement NGO thing.
Are they
That's
responsible for the map of Europe that I saw the other day? That would be the decolonized Europe, where like every ethnic group in Europe has their own country now. So it's basically like what Germany looked like before it was a unified, like it was like 1800 principalities and dukedoms and things like that.
what it should have looked like after the Second World War. But yeah, no, I mean, his whole thing is like he flies like Texas secessionists to Russia to give a speech. And maybe, I mean, he could possibly be under the impression that like California or Texas secessionism is like a movement with more than 20 people behind it. But like it's kind of the equivalent of flying out like I don't know, like a small Discord channel out somewhere, because it's like it's such little reach and such like little actual popularity among regular people that it sort of seems like a vanity project. But he's really into kind of any secessionist movement anywhere. And I guess he hosts conferences and things like that, and then flies them around. That seems to be really what he's charged with.
I mean,
Does he think that he's like doing some sort of psyop on America and that it's going to lead to our dissolution?
Yes. I mean, this is the thing. Black Hammer, the reason they've been pilloried for their many alleged crimes is not because, they are so crazy and that they're dress up. Ghazi does sometimes dress up like the Joker and then parade around a bunch of people and make vague threats against his enemies. Yes, he is clearly one of the most insane gnome type people to kind of come out of America for a while. But there's a lot of popular support behind Black Hammer, and given a couple more months, 3, 4, maybe at the most, we could actually be living in Black Hammer's America. No, I mean that's the crazy thing is all of these groups. I mean, African People's Socialist Party, Uhuru, is the least marginal among these groups. They actually came out of the Black Power movement in the 70s. They're also very weird. Black Hammer's kind of like an even weirder offshoot of them. But Black Hammer had, I think at this point, like 12 members. I mean, there a lot of people, including myself, kind of thought they were going to dissolve by last year. Ghazi's been recruiting homeless teenagers from parks in Atlanta, which is, I think a part of the reason for the very dark turn that the even darker turn that the organization has taken. But I mean, there is basically no non-marginal socialist group, although I don't know if Black Hammer what they would call themselves, but like left-wing group in America. And Black Hammer is probably the most marginal of all of them, besides maybe like the Red Guards of Austin or something like that.
I would say Red Guards of Austin probably has significantly more members.
Yes,
than
absolutely.
Black Hammer.
Many of them police officers.
Well, yeah, they're penetrating. They're finally getting a blue collar, working class people to join the movement.
Yes.
But you mentioned it's like Ghazi. He joined the Uhuru movement. It was founded in the mid 70s in Florida by a guy named Omali Yeshatela, a former
Mhm.
convict, and it was like, like any black radical organization, it was, targeted by the feds, but it was also rumored to have been funded by entirely by a white woman named Penny Hess, who is the
Yes.
she was the chairperson of the African People's Solidarity Committee, an organization of white people organizing in solidarity with the movement for the liberation of Africa and African people. Um, and then Ghazi was, I guess, like, put in charge of the reparations corps. So he was
Mhm.
given a group of white people who were, funding the organization as a form of reparations, and I guess like that's how you lead to things like the war zone stream,
Yeah.
for for non-named white people who are just, they want to support the institution, but they don't want to have names. They just want to only have numbers and fund a revolutionary black organization.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I think last year, Channel 5 put out a video where this dude Saddam, goes to the reparations march, who's black, goes and from Africa, goes to the reparations march in Oakland, and just asks all the white people marching if they can give him some money, and basically everyone's like, "Yeah, here's $5." So if you are black and you do see one of these Uhuru movement white people's marches going through your city, go up, probably get about $40-$50 together from these people. But yes, Ghazi was in charge. Not only, I think he was also in charge of recruitment at one point. Um, there is an insane video of him sort of with this like semicircle of white people where he's just like kind of berating them in this falsetto and like going through like, what's your name, like, what's your background and all this kind of stuff. He is actually eventually expelled from the Uhuru movement. I have tried really hard to find out exactly why he was expelled. But the political report from, I think, 2018 says the office of the Secretary General is being enthusiastically assumed by Comrade Ghazi. And then they talk about his what he's, his job's going to be. His fundamental stumbling block at the moment is petty bourgeois subjectivism, and because of the scope of his office in the party, unchecked subjectivism can destroy the progress we make in every area of work. And so, unfortunately, Ghazi's unchecked subjectivism led to him being expelled from the movement and starting his own sort of like Gen Z millennial Uhuru movement.
And that would be Black Hammer.
That's what I list as my weakness on LinkedIn.
Honestly, if there's anything I hate about myself, it's my unchecked subjectivism.
Yeah, I want to. So when Black Hammer first popped up, I saw this video of Ghazi berating the white people, and if I guess this is a good indication of how insane like 2018 was online. I remember someone saying, "Look, I think he's bad. I think the Anne Frank thing is bad, but he's one of the best organizers I've ever
Yes.
seen." Like, fuck.
Secret reparations, man. They've given you a number and taken away your name.
Well,
Well,
if your name was something like super offensive on Xbox Live, like just a slur, they would Microsoft forcibly would change your name to like Scared Penguin or Floppy Pancake, and then a bunch of numbers, and maybe that's the name that white people earned from the Warzone streams
yes.
after they were
The funny
numbers.
thing is Ghazi's actual real name is Augustus Romaine, which is an incredible fucking thing to be named. And he doesn't like, and I watched a video of him earlier today. He doesn't like to be called that because he says there's a lot of balls in that name, which I think I took to mean, and by the other context of what he was saying, it's too masculine, which Ghazi also seems masculine to me. So I'm a little unclear on that. But it is, he is very much like the singular leader of Black Hammer. And it really grew up around him. Unlike the Uhuru movement, which does, you're right, the Uhuru movement does seem to have been largely funded by an elderly white woman. Ghazi sort of picked at first kind of like a multiracial, any kind of college student, because college students were getting up to some funky stuff in 2018. That was one of the funkiest years to be a college student
Oh
because
yeah.
people were really like learning a lot about politics. And do you remember Chief Suh, Felix?
Oh my god, I loved her. I loved her. I felt bad for her. You know,
Yes.
Chief Suh, if people don't remember, Korean American who posted like exclusively in AAVE, and posted that sort of like inflammatory like, oh, if your dad was in the Navy Reserve on the weekends, he should be beheaded type stuff. Which, like, yeah, sure, you know, but like Commander Ghazi type stuff, but from a Korean American perspective, people were, I thought, incredibly nasty to her. They found her normie post from like
Yes.
2015 when she was like a sophomore in college, and she was like, "If you don't support John McCain, to hell with you."
Yes.
Like, like, she was just like a boring like cock Republican. But this was, it was a big time for like sort of amateurish like college third worldism online, at
Yes.
least, not like in the flesh space so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people didn't really know what to do with Black Hammer because that was sort of like, there was a lot of confusion, I guess you could say, about identity politics and stuff like that. And like, there was kind of people didn't really know where to draw the line at it or whatever. And so it was like, well, I guess like what she's saying is good. I mean, her whole thing that I think she was an adoptee from Korea, to white parents, and I think it was like she was sort of emblematic of these people who really took like almost to this like as like a lifestyle in every part of their lives, where she like denounced her parents, joined the most insane group that she could possibly join, became a rapper, and then I think she stayed on. I remember she was their chief science officer, and she was a chemistry student at a college in North Carolina, and appeared to post her homework and be like, "These are new Black Hammer science discoveries," and like we're in the lab and stuff like this. Um,
She was like Kim Philby. She was
yes,
stealing stealing information. But yeah, it was, this was, if I remember anything about this time, yeah, it was a very goofy, very silly time online. And there was this ethos that, in retrospect was very infantilizing that people had, which is like, look, if somebody who's like Korean or black or whatever says something that's kind of crazy, like Anne Frank is a Karen, or like, if you go to a 4th of July barbecue, you should be castrated, but like don't say anything because you can't criticize anything they say
yeah,
because their general perspective is right. They're going in the right direction. It's like they were acting as though they were looking at a kid finger painting like a vague shape, and the kid says it's a dog, and they're like, "Well, yeah, we just have to say it's a dog."
yeah, yeah,
Brace, describe to the extent that like Black Hammer has an ideology. You described it as a crude mishmash of Jay Sakai's settlers, half red Mao, and somewhat maybe also African socialists. But
yeah.
I mean, I'd be like yeah, how like just drill down deeper into that. Like how they like sort of melded together Maoist third worldism and like the book Settlers by Jay Sakai.
So to be clear, there is zero reference to the joint dictatorship of the proletariat of oppressed nations on their website. They make absolutely no reference to it. So we're talking about the crudest third worldism that can possibly be forged. One doesn't get the impression that they're very well read, and I'm not the smartest guy in the world or anything, but I know a thing or two about this kind of stuff. And so I've looked through, I haven't looked in a while, but I've looked through their like points of unity and stuff like that. They sort of claim to be Maoists, but they're also basically pro like I don't know how to describe it, but like they're not actually Maoists. I think they kind of just like Mao, but then they also don't like Mao sometimes. They hate Karl Marx. They say he's a colonizer. Their sort of mission statement read, Black Hammer organization exists to take the land back for all colonized people worldwide. We're focused on building dual contending power of and for the colonized masses. Now, something, longtime communist heads can remember is whenever someone starts talking about dual power, they are just wasting time because they can't figure out how to actually explain themselves. Not that that doesn't exist as a concept or anything, but 99% of the time, that just means someone's treading water.
Dual power is the communist equivalent of passive income.
Yes. Yes.
Communist drop shipping.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's when someone's immediately busts out with the dual power thing, you're like, all right, I can tell that you don't fully have a grasp on what you're
I
talking
mean, like,
about.
okay, so like, just to like, I don't know, maybe, like center this a little bit. What do people think they're talking about when they say I'm trying to build dual power?
It depends on the context, but a lot of times people are like, well, if we just make like the people's NGO, that means that we can control the country. It really it depends, I guess, on who you're talking about. But when anarchists talk about it, it means they're going to build a food, not bombs, and then of course we're going to have anarchy in America. When a lot of communists talk about it, it means that they're going to get together in one room, be as annoying as possible, and then they're going to take over America. When Democratic Socialists talk about it, they're talking about, well, we're going to, of course, donate to Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, and then we're going to take over America. Basically, it just means whatever, and this isn't what it actually means, but what it means when people say it is that they're going to find the most annoying thing to do and then do that for about 6 months until they succumb to their mental illness or get canceled. And then they're going to just go finish college or I don't know, just disappear into another place. That's what building dual power means when almost anybody I've ever heard says it. When Black Hammer says it, that means this is specifically what they mean, that they were going to build their own city in the mountains of Colorado. And from there, Hammer City would expand like, water blotting on a paper towel until until it was not only Hammer City, but Hammer State, Hammer, well, I guess the highest thing up from state is country. I guess Hammer
Nation,
region.
maybe.
Yeah. And then
Hammer Prefecture.
Yes, yeah. And then we would be the Hammer Nation. And so their goal from basically as far as I started paying attention to them was to raise money for funds to design and build a fully functional city for Black Hammer members.
They should have hired some of those guys that have all the emojis in their names and that like they're part of the NIMBY versus YIMBY thing.
Yes.
The guys who are named like, Douglas No More Middle Child Tax France.
Yeah. The fact that the Yimbys did not make a tactical alliance with Black Hammer to build market rate housing in Hammer City.
What they were trying to build Hammer City. This is on like a state park or something.
No, they all right. So they raised actually a shit ton of money.
Yeah.
Not gonna say that I didn't contribute, a couple thousand here or there, just so I don't have to play Warzone if they do win. But
it's a bad game.
Just hedging my bets here. They raised a considerable amount of money, like tens of thousands. Like I think almost. This might be an exaggeration, but I think maybe even approaching $100,000. They say they purchase a plot of land in Colorado. They move out there and begin filming some of the strangest, those like primitive construction videos you see on YouTube, like fake.
Yeah,
it was like
when guys in like Indonesia will build a pool with no drainage, and it's just like
it's obviously fake.
Yeah.
But it was
I remember the videos. It was them just sort of like standing on 2x4s and just sort of like in this plot of land, just being like, just sort of like there was like very limited construction material, but they were just sort of like milling around, looking at it, things like that.
It's like if you hired two highly neurodivergent people to build a set of Deadwood. Like it was like people just like putting planks on the ground and like I don't think anything actually like I don't listen. I'm not a builder, right? Like I'm not. I've never worked construction or anything like that. I do know though that almost all buildings have what's called a foundation, like under the ground, and also pipes and things like that. Like plumbing, electricity, they put so much stuff under a house. It's not just built flat on the ground. That did not appear to be what was being built. And then the sheriff came and, the people, the masses of America learned that from a press release from the sheriff's department that they had escorted several squatters off of a piece of land because those squatters had not actually filed any paperwork to actually purchase the land from the owner of it, and also clearly had no building permits or anything like that. And so they just didn't actually buy it. They just talked to a guy about buying this plot of land in Colorado, and then they were kicked off because they were trespassing.
I always thought that was weird, like the fact that they didn't buy the building, right?
Yeah.
I wonder, I was trying to figure it out if like the guy that they talked to was like, we talked about it being a very confused time. was like a sort of guilty liberal guy, and Ghazi just gave his usual spiel, and this guy like enthusiastically nodded along, like, "Oh, that sounds great! Like a separate city for all oppressed people and the white people playing Warzone. Yeah, no, it's really cool what you guys are doing." But like, they never signed any papers or
Yeah.
anything. And if Ghazi just took that to mean that he owned the land now, it was always I never knew what happened there. Because even like, yeah, Black Hammer was a scam and a cult and everything, but it is like, well, you presumably they must have thought that they had some right to it if they were trying to build their
Mhm.
2x4 city.
Well, I can't remember the guy's name, but one member was sort of took the blame from this from Ghazi, and Ghazi I probably pronounced this wrong, exorciated him on a live stream by being like, comrade, alligator did forget to file some paperwork here, and he is the reason that things did not work out, but we're not going to talk about that right now. Like, sort of passive aggressively, and then occasionally very aggressively digging into one of his chiefs, because that was what you were called if you were sort of a team leader in the Black Hammer organization, for actually not getting something notarized, and then fucking up the land purchase essentially.
I mean, buying property is a real pain in the ass. I mean, there's like a shitload of paperwork you have to do.
It's to me,